Today I've got for you a course on Svelte.js. Svelte.js is a JavaScript framework for developing web applications like React, Angular, and Vue. So the difference between those three and Svelte is that Svelte isn't really a dependency, it's more of a compiler. So basically Svelte compiles all of your JavaScript in on runtime and gives you the final code. So it is actually really fast and it is also really small. So we cannot even call this a framework because it's a library like React.js. So you can see that there are some features, right? Less code, there is no virtual DOM, there is it's truly reactive. So this is the Svelte official website, if you couldn't tell, svelte.dev. And here we have a little quick start guide here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my terminal and I'm in my folder where I develop web applications. And what I'm going to do is I will type npx degit svelte.js slash template. You can see it's highlighted over here. And then I'm just going to call it Svelte, just like that. And what this does is npx is a command that allows you to run node npm applications or npm command line tools without actually having to install them. And then we are running the degit command or dgit, which basically grabs a repository, a git repository. By default it grabs it from github and then it degits it. So as it is in its name, it just copies it, it just clones it over to your machine, and then Svelte is the name of the folder that it is going to clone it to. So if I hit the enter key, it npx degit should now clone the Svelte.js template to the Svelte directory. So let's quickly cd into Svelte, and you can see if I ls that we have a bunch of files here. So this is your Svelte template, and then the second thing we have to do is we have to run npm install. So type in that, so npm install, and this will install all of the dependencies that's and including Svelte. So and then finally we can run the application with npm run dev. But before that I just want to open this in my code editor, which is VS Code. So you can use any other code editor you want, like WebStorm, or even PyCharm Professional if you're daring enough. But anyway, we need to install an extension called Svelte because Svelte is not natively supported in VS Code yet. So install Svelte for VS Code by Svelte, and you can also install Svelte IntelliSense if you have the VS Code IntelliSense plugin. It helps a lot. Anyway, let's go back over here into our main files and I will show you what all of these files are. Alright, so let's see what our Svelte template looks like. So first we have node modules. This is there in every node project. You know what this is, I know what this is, let's not cover this. Next we have the public and the src directory. We'll actually leave these directories to the end. Let's look at the files. So number one is gitignore. So this contains all of the directories that will by default be ignored in your when you commit something to GitHub. So we can leave, or any other git when you commit something to git, actually not just GitHub. So we'll leave that, you know what that is. We can leave these C files. Actually I want to show you what package.json is. You can see we have three scripts, build, dev, and start. And you can notice something here, and that is we have no dependencies, zero dependencies. All of these are dev dependencies because I told you Svelte is a compiler. It compiles. Actually we do have one dependency, but that is not related to Svelte. That is just for serving our applications. But anyway, so these are all Svelte dependencies, and most of this is a roll up, which is the thing which is like Webpack. Basically it bundles all of your code. So serve will run the code, Rollup will bundle the code, and Svelte will compile the code, basically. Let's look at the config. So we have a bunch of plugins that are imported. Basically, this is what it does, and this is much less complicated than the Webpack config from something like React.js. It looks like everything is in tabs here, so I'll just convert these to spaces. Anyway, so that is our rollup config.js. We have the Svelte plugin here that compiles all of our applications. Then we have Resolve, which I think I don't know what Resolve this. I think it resolves imports. CommonJS, and we also have Serve, and we have library load, and we also have Cursor. So we have all of this in the rollup config.js, and then we have the readme, which is from the GitHub template. Now let's take a look at these directories. First of all, let's take a look at scripts. So scripts has only one file called setup script, and what this does is it just sets up TypeScript. So it allows you to use TypeScript in Svelte. We will take a look at TypeScript later on and not right now. So you can just delete this folder from your template if you want to. Alright, now let's look at the public directory. We have three files: favicon.png, which is just the Svelte logo, or it's a gray version of the Svelte logo. Then we have global CSS, which is just some basic styling, and then we have index.html. So here we have a title. You can change this if you want. So I'll change this to my first Svelte app. And we also have some imports. We have the favicon, we have the CSS, and most importantly, we also have a bundle CSS, which is the CSS from your components. So in Svelte, you can scope your CSS down to components, and that's one thing I really like about it. So if you define any CSS in one component, it doesn't spill out and leak to other components like it does in React, for example. And then also we have the bundle.js, which will be generated during runtime by Svelte. And then we don't have any kind of root element in the body like you see in React. So we don't have any div with an ID of root. We don't have anything like that, or we don't have like an app root component as seen in Angular, because Svelte directly just adds it to the body. And you can customize this if you want. You can have a root element if you want. So let's get rid of let's close that, and let's move over to the main directory of your app, which is the source directory. And this also has two files. First we'll take a look at main.js, and this just starts your Svelte app. So it will import app, so it will import this component, which we will take a look at later, and it will just initialize this app. So we'll say const app equals to new app, and then the target will be document.body. Again, I told you can change this. You can have like a root element if you want, and then it passes in some props. So these props are being used by this app component that we will look at later, and then it of course exports it. So let's also convert these tabs to spaces, and let's take a look at the app component. So here you can see this is a Svelte. This is a file with the Svelte extension, and this is just like a HTML file you might have noticed. So it's similar to a Vue.js template, where you have the script and you also have like a template element. But here it is not just limited to the template element. You can use any element you want, and you can also use how many ever elements you want. It doesn't have to be scoped to like one parent element. Anyway, so here's a component, and again you will not get this syntax highlighting if you don't install this Svelte extension. So we also have some so let's take a look at what we have here. First we have let's take a look at this last actually, because this is a bit complicated. Let's take a look at the styles first. So we have our CSS styles, and as I told you, you can put styles here, and it will not leak to other components. So if I say the h1 color has to be this red color, it will not leak to any other component. So if I define another component and I make a h1 there, that component will not be red unless you explicitly specify it. and all of these styles will be exclusive to this component unless you add the global attribute, but we will look at that later. And now here is your main component. So this does not have to be in a main element. It can be in any element. It can even be on its own. It doesn't even have to be scoped in an element, as I told you before. But let's just undo all of that, and you can see we have a h1 here, which has a hello, and then there is this little curly bracket, and then there is name. So name is defined over here, and this basically gets the value from over here that we passed, props name equals to world. So you can see that we have export let name. This is how we declare props in Svelte. So props are just special variables that are passed to components. They can either be passed from other components, or they can be passed like this. So a name is set to world, so then it'll just directly say hello and then world. And then these curly braces, it's called templating syntax. So this is there in most frameworks. So you just have a curly brace, then you type the name of the variable in, and then it will render the variable. So let's actually just start our application, and I'll show you what I mean. So I'll npm run dev, just like that, and it should start up, and it starts up really fast because Svelte is really small. And let's open this up, press Control click, and over here you can see that Svelte has started up. So we have our styles where the h1 is red, and then we have this little paragraph link here. So let's get rid of this paragraph, just like that. Now if I save that, you can see that if I refresh this page, sometimes there's a bug there, but if I refresh this page, you can see that this paragraph is gone. And now if I change the name from world to Svelte, for example, and then if I save that, you can see it says hello Svelte. So this is how you pass props into the component, and here is not just limited to one prop. You can also say I don't know, age colon 20. Then I can say, okay, come over here, and I can create a paragraph tag, and I'll say you are age years old. And you can see that age is not defined, so we have to do define that by just typing in export let age. And whenever you type in export let and then a variable name, it just declares that as a prop. So this doesn't have to be just encapsulated or just limited to variables. This can be any kind of JavaScript expression that returns a value. So if I say name plus exclamation mark, you can see that it says Svelte and then an exclamation mark at the end. And this can just be any JavaScript expression. So I can say 10 plus 20, and then it'll automatically convert the numbers to integers. I mean the integers to strings and booleans to strings and all of that. And sometimes, as you saw, it gives you a white screen or a blank screen. So you just have to refresh your page if that happens. I'm not sure why that happens. I think that is a bug, and it will get fixed soon. So anyway, now that we learned this, you can also make this the output of any function. So let's define a function up here in the script tag. So function, I don't know, say hi, and then we'll return hi. Then if I go here and I say hi, just like that, you can see we have hi. So this is not just limited to variables. You can also get any kind of expression that returns a value. This has to return a value. Now if I type something like console dot log hello, you can see that it says undefined. So and if we look in the console, so let me just open that up, you can see we have hello down here. So if it doesn't return a value, it will return undefined. Unlike I think React errors out if you do something like this. So Svelte doesn't do that. Svelte is really good. Anyway, Now let's get rid of all of these boilerplate code. So I'm just going to go to the bottom, just going to select all, I'll just remove everything, and I'll also remove these props. I don't need the prop, so we can go here, and then I'll add just a simple h1 that says hi. So here you go, we have hi, and it's looking like this because we have the global CSS styles. So I'll get rid of that later on. Now anyway, let's look at uh, attributes to elements. Let's look at how we can pass variables as attributes to elements. So I'm gonna have a script tag right here, and I will define a color to be brown. Now I want this h1, actually let's pick a simpler value. Let's say font size, and I want this font size to be 48, and what I'm going to do is I will say let this h1 style, okay, let's just pick a simpler value. So let's do a href, and then I want this href to point to my website, just like that. And then I'll add an a element with a href of href, and now I have to enter something. You can see if you hover over this, Svelte has this thing called alley, which is basically accessibility things, and elements should have child content, so they should have content inside this. So I'll say visit my website, and if I go back here, you can see we have visit my website, and this has an href to my website, so it correctly works. Now for example, you can see that Prettier actually did a shortcut technique here, where it made where if both the attribute and the variable have the same name, then you can just do this. So you can just directly pass it in without needing any kind of attribute name. So you just have to directly pass it in only if your variable and attribute have the same name. If my variable was named differently, like something like this, then you cannot do that syntax like before. So if you do something like this, you can see first of all Ali says that we should have an href, and second, it doesn't work. So there is no href to this element. If I click on it, nothing happens. So only if the attribute has the same name as the variable, then it will work. Now let's take a look at a bit more complex templating. So I'll say let color equals green maybe, and to add a color we have to use the style attribute, and I'll say color will be the color. So you can do something like this. Now you can see that color also matches color here. I cannot do this. This is not going to work because this is CSS, and this is a whole other thing. We are just adding this color template. We're just putting this in this string. You can do this in Svelte, or there's another approach. So you can use template strings. So color colon color. So this is just native JavaScript, and we're putting this in brackets because this is a JavaScript expression. So both of these will work. Let me show you the other option. So I'll change this to double quotes, and I'll remove this dollar sign here. And if now let's go back here, and let's have this refresh. Okay, there you go. So we have both of these elements and they are green. So any of this syntax works. Now let's take a look at styling. So you saw how we style here. So it is just vanilla HTML styling. So you can also give a background color. So this is just native CSS. There's no there's no, you don't need to give objects like in React. So I want to say background should be yellow, then the background is yellow. So this is just native styling. Now what I want to do is I want to add a style tag. So this is the specialty of Svelte. All components are all styles and components are exclusive to the component only. So let's quickly add a style to the A element, and I'll say the text decoration should be none. So this will remove the underline. Now if I save it and go back here, you can see that the underline is removed. And let me actually inspect this element. Let's look at this, and you can see that all of these elements have a class. So it has a class of svelte hyphen and then some random characters. So this is there to encapsulate these components. So now if I go down here to our style element, or our there it is, bundle CSS. So I think I have to go to sources and bundle CSS. So source, okay, where is it? It's I think it's in build. Yeah, build bundle CSS. And you can see we have a svelte dash, the same random characters, and this is our style from earlier. So this, if we put it in any other component, which I'll show you later, it will not affect that styling. So now let's look at other components now. So let's create another component, and here I will just create another one, and I will say paragraph dot svelte, and I'll just simply add a paragraph. I'll add a p element, and then I'll say hello. And this is it. This is auto component. You just have to define some kind of styling, some kind of a markup, and that is it. All components are exported by default, so you don't need any JavaScript in them. And to use a component, we just have to import it. So we'll say import, and since it's exported by default, we can name it whatever I want. I can name it pg from paragraph. So this is a relative import, so I should say dot slash paragraph dot svelte. And the svelte extension is really important. You have to put paragraph dot svelte at the end. And also one more thing, component's name should start with a capital letter, otherwise it will not work. So let's just add this pg component, p capital of course, just like that. And you can self close it, it doesn't matter. And let's refresh this. And you can see we have hello here. So that is how simple it is. And I just want to show you that the styles do not affect, the styles are only local scope to components. So I'll just add a href to slash, and I don't know why it's doing that. So I'm just going to say something like this, some random text there, and you can see that this href is blue. And unlike oh wait, this is like very bad, because by default, well, just remove the global CSS just removes the text decoration. So I'm just going to change this to some other thing. Let's say the background color should be blue, and let's let that reload. And you can see that the links are blue, and this is actually yellow because we specified it in the style CSS, in the element style, and of course the element style will override the style set in the head tag. And you can see that this does not affect this element at all, because this is another component, and we can check that. So if I go over here, you can see that this component has a different class, and this component doesn't even have a class. Scroll down, so you can see this component doesn't even have a class, so it's not even affected. And if you go to our bundle CSS, you can see only the components with this class are affected with it. So that is an amazing quality of Svelte that I wish all other frameworks had. So let's look at how you can uh, add event handlers. So let's get rid of let's get rid of this paragraph component. Let's make things simple. Let's only put one component. Get rid of this too, and get rid of this. Let's also get rid of this. We don't need this. So now I'll add a button here. So button, and I'll say click me. So now if we click this button, you can see I just go to my console, nothing happens, and that's because we haven't defined any event handlers for this. So in Svelte, you just don't use the HTML thing. You don't do something like this. You instead have to use something called a directive, and we are going to be using the on directive, which is uh, basically it defines an event. So on is called whenever there's an event, and we can say on click. So whenever there's a click event, in here, let's remove these quotes. Actually, the quotes can stay because this doesn't matter, but I like to remove them for better syntax. Anyway, on click, and then you can define any function here. So I'll just define a function, and I'll console log hi, just like that, and save that. Come back over here. And now if I click this, you can see in the console that hi gets logged. So this is not the only event. There's also on DBL click, which is on double click. And if I refresh, you can see whenever we double click it, the event gets fired. And finally, we also not just finally, we have so many events. We also have on mouse enter, just like that. So whenever I move my mouse here, it logs high. uh, I also have on key down, on key press, and there are some events that are only that are exclusive through some kind of elements, like on the form. There is the on submit event, and this will get called when you submit the form. And there are many events, and I will leave a link to the Svelte documentation in the description below. Okay, now let's take a look at something that is exclusive to Svelte only, and that is the declarative syntax. So this declarative syntax is like the use effect hook on React, if you've used that. So basically what this will do is we can define a function that will be called whenever any other variable updates, or whenever any of the variables that are used in the function updates. Let me show you. So first let's actually take a look at updating these functions or updating these variables. So I'll add an input with a type of text, and then I'll give it an ID so that we can reference it. So I'll say text, for example, and then I'll also add a button, and then here I'll just say I don't know, save, and I'll add a click event to this button. So I spelled that wrong, but anyway, on click I'll have a function here, and then in this function, first let's define a variable. So I'll say let text equals to an empty string at first, but now what I'll do is I'll say text equals to document dot get element by ID text dot value, and now you can see whenever let's actually display this element somewhere. So put it here, and if I go back to my Svelte, you can see that we have if I type in anything here, and then if I click the save button, it just appears here. So there is no need of doing some state magic or something like that. It just automatically works with Svelte. And now I want to show you the same thing, but I want the text to have an exclamation mark. So text with exclamation, and I'm just going to define that variable here. Let text with exclamation mark equal to text plus exclamation mark. So if I run this code, you can see that first of all we already have this blank thing, and now if I click save, that this doesn't update automatically. And to do that, we have to use the declarative syntax. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to create a declarative syntax block, and this is how you do it is you just put a dollar here and just do something like this. So now whatever code is there in this block will get executed, and if it's just a one liner, you can also omit these curly braces. So I'm just going to say text with exclamation mark equals to text plus an exclamation mark, and I can get rid of this declaration. So I'm just going to delete all of this, and I'll just set it to an empty string. So you can see that I have this declarative syntax. It will set the text to exclamation mark to the text plus an exclamation mark, and this will be called whenever any of its dependencies change. So whenever any of the values that it is using change, and actually we have to remove this so that it doesn't infinitely loop itself, and this will still work because we have not declared it, but it will still work. So now let me just show you with an example. Now if I type anything in here and if I save it, you can see that it automatically updates. So if you're using any variables that are used inside these declarative syntaxes, whenever these variables update, then this block will be called again. So that is very simple. So it's like the use effect hook in React, as I said. Now let's take a look at let's extend this a bit. So I want to say if this text is equal to hello, then I want to set the text with exclamation mark to hi, just like that. And you can see that we get a small type error, so we can just fix that by saying let text with exclamation mark. Come back over here, and okay, there you go. So now I'm just going to type something randomly into that, and the text with exclamation mark hasn't changed yet, but if I type in hello and then press this button, you can see we have hi back there. Now what if I wanted this thing to be like a block of code? So I can just put this in a block just like that, and then I can execute multiple statements like maybe console.log hi, and then maybe an alert as well, alert hello, and then if I type hello, click save, you can see we have an alert and we also have hi there. So that is amazing. Now you can, if you want multiple statements, then you have to do it like this, as I said before. So console.log text, so this will be called whenever text is changed, and then we can also set some other random log over there or any other function, and then if I type something here, it'll just log it down there. But now one more thing I want to show you is that if there are no dependencies, sorry, if there are no dependencies here, and then if I type something in here, you can see that it only gets called once, and that is because there are no dependencies, so there is nothing to update this thing. So that was declarative syntax, and now let's look at how we update arrays. So I'll have an array over here, so I'll say a equals to 1 2 3 4 5, and I'll get rid of this import, and I'll get rid of this handler. Let's remove all of this, and I just want to say on click update array. And now what I wanted to do is I'll define this function. So function update array, and this will just array dot push. So this is how you normally update an array, and I actually have to put a let here. So this is how you normally update an array. I'll say math dot, I don't know, math dot random, just a random number, and now I'm going to get rid of this because this doesn't I don't need this anymore. Get rid of that as well, and I'll just json.stringify this, json.stringify, so it shows probably, and I'll just type that in there. So now if I refresh this, our query string is not defined. We have a little thing that Visual Studio Code likes to do. So you just have to get rid of that, and you can see we have 1 2 3 4 5. And now if I click save, the array keeps getting appended to, but it is not reflected in the DOM, and that is because Svelte will only update the DOM if the variable has been reassigned. So this does not reassign the variable. A.push or pushing anything does not reassign the variable. You can do something like this, which is a.push and then a equals to a. So this will fix it. Now let's push it. So you can see this will fix it, but there is an easier way, and that is by using the spread syntax that was introduced in JavaScript ES6. So you just say something like this, so spread a, which basically means that whatever elements are already there in a, add that to this new array, and then also add the new elements. So now this also works. So there are two ways you can do this. I personally prefer the second way, because of course it is not that redundant, and also same thing with objects. Now let's take a look at something more complicated, which is props. So we're going to be creating another component here, and I'll say another component dot svelte, and I'll add a script tag just for now, and I'll just say p. I don't know why it's not working. I'll say hello from another component, and let's just put that here. I'll get rid of all of this. So let's put a script, and I'll put the other component. And if you have VS Code, then it can also automatically import these components for you. But anyway, there you go. And if I refresh this, you've seen this already. It says hello from another component. Now let's look at passing props in the component. So first of all, we have to declare that we need some props. For example, I can say export let message, and I can go down here and I'll just write the message. If we go back over here, you can see that we get a warning in the console that says another component was created without expected prop message. So we need to pass this prop message to another component. It doesn't error out, but it also doesn't like it. So I believe if you use TypeScript, it will probably error out, or the compiler will not like it. But let's pass the message here, and you can see that we get some IntelliSense. So VS Code does detect that we need message, and then we'll just say hello, and you can see we have hello down here. Now if we do not declare that we need this message component, or we need this message prop, so I'm just going to get rid of this, you can see that we get an error in the console, or a warning in the console that says another component was created with an unknown prop message. So Svelte does tell you if you have done something wrong with your code, uh, and also the same thing from earlier. If the variable name and the prop name is the same thing, then you can use an object just like this, and it will work And also if you update the component over here, so I'll add an input, a type of text, and I'll say on key down. Let's give this an ID of X. Actually, I think we don't need to use the ID. I can just say message equals to message plus, or I think plus equals to works too. So plus equals to e dot key, and save that. And if I type something here, you can see that this component also updates. If you update the prop over here, then it also updates in the component over here. So this is how you send props to the components. And let's look at getting default values. And that is really simple. So you just have to give a default value over here. And now if I do not give the message over here, then you can see that we do not get any error in the console because there is a default value set. And if we do give a message, control Z all of that, then the message is set to the value in the that is passed as props. So that is how you can give default values to components. And then finally, this is amazing syntax over here that makes you write even lesser code. Let's say we have two components, so I'll first say message equals to this, and then another message, for example, equals to this. Then let's also export it over here. So another message equals to this. Then we'll also do the same thing here, another message. So we have another message, and you can see that we have not given the other message. So let's just do that, another message. And you can see how quickly, if you have multiple props here, like maybe 5 or 10 props, then this will be really messy if the props all have the same name. So you can use something you can actually spread an object over here. Let me show you. So I'm going to create an object called props. So that this will be equal to, so the message will be something and another message will be something else. And let's just change this to props.message. And now what I can do here is I can just spread props just like this, and you can see that it automatically assigns all of the values, and this still works. So that is really amazing with Svelte, that you can just use one object. So this is very useful if you're getting values from a database where everything is already in an object. So this was basic component templating in Svelte. Let's take a look at special blocks. Alright, now let's take a look at if blocks. So if you have used some other kind of framework, you will know that you might have done something like this, where you would have said, I don't know, maybe like a variable like login, and then if you're logged in, then you can show the other component, otherwise you'll just show some random text. But this doesn't work with Svelte because Svelte is not JSX. You cannot put HTML in JavaScript, um, because HTML is just HTML and JavaScript is just a JavaScript. So to fix this, Svelte provides us with some useful blocks. So I'm just going to get rid of all of this stuff here, and I'll just say let login equals to false, so the user is not logged in. So I can use this special syntax where I say if login, and we need to close this if just like that, and then inside this, whatever we type here, you're logged in. So whatever we type here, it will be shown if if this condition is true. So login is currently false, but if I set it to true, you can see we get you are logged in. and whatever is outside the if will be shown regardless. So if it is false, it gets shown. Looks like we have the bug again, so you just have to restart the server if that happens to you. I don't know why it's happening. It doesn't happen to me that much. Today it's just happening a lot. Anyway, now even if this is false, for example, you can see that it is still shown. Now let's take a look at else, if else blocks, and that you can do by adding a colon and then else, and then we can say you're not logged in, just like that. If you go over here, you can say you're not logged in, and otherwise, so since this is only a true or false situation, we cannot use else if. So I'll say let login equals to yes. So I'm going to say if login equals to yes, then you're logged in, and then we'll add an else if here. So else if, similar to JavaScript, just say else if and then give a condition here, login equals to steps required, maybe something like that. Then we'll say you please verify email, maybe something like that. And then we also have an else, and then we'll just set this. So I'll just grab this, copy that, and we can set this to step required, and I think I messed that up actually, but there you go, steps required, just like that. And you can see please verify email over there. So this is how you have if blocks, and just like if, we also have for, but it's not called for in Svelte, it's actually called each. So this is like the for each loop in for arrays. So let's quickly create an array. So let array is equal to 1 2 3 4 5, simple array. And then what I'll say is I'll say hash each array as item, and I'll say slash each, and then here I'll put a paragraph with the item here. And I think you've already understood what's going on. So this is the each block, and it's basically taking this array, and each item, it is looping through each item and then giving and then the variable is item. So let me show this to you in JavaScript. So for let item of r, and I can just console log item. So you can see we get the same output here. So 1 2 3 4 5, same thing in the console, 1 2 3 4 5. So this is the each block, and this only works for arrays, of course. If this is an object, for example, then it will just error out. So also, I think, let me just remove this for loop, and also my syntax isn't correct, need to provide a key there. But you can see we have an error here that says each only iterates over array like objects. So that is really nice. We have a each loop, and now for one of my favorite features of Svelte, an await block. So Svelte's await blocks allow you to await for a promise to finish. So I'm just going to go here, async function hi, and we'll say const r equals to await fetch, I don't know, https, maybe my website, and we'll just return some random thing. I'll just return a string hi or hello, and then we can add the await block again, await. Then so VS Code actually allows you to, VS Code actually has some snippets. So await hi, and then we put the text that we want here. So let's have a paragraph loading, then what we have is a text maybe that we get back, and then I'll add a p here. I'll just display that text. Okay, there you go. So now it's loading, and Oh, it failed. So you can see that if it failed, I can add a catch block and catch the error, and I'll just say error err, and oh, it's the bug again. I don't know why this keeps happening. But anyway, we have an error, type error failed to fetch. So if the promise succeeds, for example, alright, so I have a JSON placeholder URL copied to my clipboard, and if I just do that, come back over here, let this refresh. No, it didn't save, that's why it didn't refresh. And anyway, we get the text back. So you can see that's how promises work, and you can see loading flashes for a bit there. So that's how the await block works. Let's take a look at event modifiers. So event modifiers allow us to modify event handlers. So let's add a script here, just like that, and we'll have a button that will say click me once only, just like that. And now what I want to do is add an event, and I'll say console.log hi. Come over here, and then if I click this, you can see that I can click it multiple times, but it only says I want to be clicked once. So this is very useful for stuff like form submissions. I'm just going to add a pipeline bracket or a pipeline here, and I'll add a once over there. So basically this will only run this event once, and then once that event runs, it just removes the handler. So you can see it only ran once. So there are other different methods or other different modifiers, like one is stop propagation, which just calls either stop propagation without you having to do anything. Stop propagation, I think that's how you spell it. Then there's also passive and non-passive. There's capture, which fires the event during the capture phase instead of the bubble phase, and there's also self. So let me show you an example for self. So I'll add a div here, and I'll add an h1 that says click the div only. Actually an h1 is a bad element. I'll just do span. So click the div only, and I'll add an on click. This will be a function that says console.log yay, and I'll set a pipeline to say self, and I'll also add a background color to this span element so that we can differentiate it from the div. And you can see click the div only. Now if I click this span, nothing happens, but if I click this div and not the span, you can see that it console logs a. Now without this self event modifier, you can see that if I click anywhere that is in the div, it will get called. So this is very useful for stuff like models, and where you have to click just one element but there are other elements inside it. Alright, let's move on to form events. I'll add a form here, and instead of action I'll just say on colon submit, and I'll add a prevent default event modifier. You can see that we got IntelliSense for once, and I'm just going to console log something, and I'll just skip all of these form steps, and I'll just add a submit button just like that. Let this thing refresh, which it's not doing for some reason, or because it didn't get saved. There you go. Now if I click this, you can see that it runs, and we have a prevent default too. If you don't have this prevent default, then it refreshes the page every time we submit the form. So that is not really good if I don't know, doing an API, you're calling an API or something like that. So on default is like really important. Alright, now let's take a look at component events. So you can define your own events, and this is where Svelte really shines. I'm going to call my another component again. So let's say another component, just like that. And inside this another component, I'll have a button. So I'll get rid of all of this. I'll have a first I'll have a script, of course, and then here I'll have a button. Let's just click me, and now I'm going to import something from Svelte, not dot Svelte, just Svelte, and this will be called create event dispatcher. And basically this will allow you to create an event dispatcher, as it says in its name. And an event dispatcher basically dispatches events. So whenever I call this function, and then I give it any name, it will let's give it a name that is easy to remember. I don't know, d text, something like that. And then if I call this event, whenever, let's not call this just like that, let's call it when I click the button. So on click, let's call the d function, and let's give it a name of text. So now what it's going to do is it will fire a text event. So I can say on text, and you can see that VS Code or the Svelte plugin has automatically detected that we are calling this event somewhere in our code. So you can say on text, and we can then use this as any other event modifier or event handler. Then you can log something in the console. So you can see that this works. But now what if we wanted to pass something to this event? Like for example, I wanted to pass maybe a random number. Then I can just do something like this, math dot random, maybe, for example. And now what I will do is I can access this from the event. If I grab this e object, then I can access this through e dot detail, and you can see that we get random numbers. So this is how you do component events. Alright, now let's take a look at inputs. So here I have an input, and then here I have some text. Let's look at this code. So I have declared a variable text equals to hello, and then I'm displaying it here. And now what I want to do is I want this input, whatever value we enter in this input, this text will be changed according to that. So first of all, we can set the default value just like that, and then now what we can do is we can add an on input event handler, and then this we can give a function, and I'll just grab e from here. So this will be this e will contain the target. So if we say e dot target, then this it will point to this input, and then we can get the value of the input from there. So I can just say text equals to e dot target dot input, I mean value, sorry. So e dot target dot value, just like that. And I'm saving that, and you can see that this input is preloaded with this value, and if I change it, you can see that it changes over there. But very soon you will begin to notice that this is a lot of code that you have to write for one simple functionality. Well, Svelte makes it much easier for us. So I'm just going to create a brand new import, and what I'm going to do is first of all I'll set the value to text, and I'll also add a directive before value, and I will add bind. So this bind is a directive that basically makes uh, this text bind. So basically it allows the component, so this is a component, it allows that component to change the data, that change its props, and it will also change up here. So before, if you remember, if I change something up here, it will change in the component but not the other way around. So this bind keyword here, it helps us to change the value of, it helps the component to change the value that was passed to it as props. So let me show you with an example. So let's go back over here, and looks like we got the bug again. So if that happens to you, just restart the server. There you go. Now if I type in anything, you can see that it works. And and this is not the only thing that can be binded to. There is a lot of values that you can bind, and here it is. And some of them are only read only. For example, client height and client width, these are read only, so you cannot change them. There's also in HTML you can bind text content, this offset width and height, and then there are some other elements that you can bind values to. But now let's just look at inputs for now. So I'll create a number input. So I'll create a number input, and this number input I will bind it to text. Bind value text. Now what I'll do is I'll set this text to any number, so a random number, and I'll say text plus 1. So you can see that it works as a number first of all, because we set it as a number. But then if I change this value, you can see that Svelte automatically changes this. So if you have a number input, then it automatically changes its value to a number data type. So this is like very useful in Svelte, and you can see that it is a number. I'm able to add stuff to it. But if I make this a string, it's a fish, you can see that 1 gets appended to it. But if I change the value, then Svelte will automatically make this into a number again. See, the same thing is happening with a checkbox input as well. So this time instead of value, we have to bind the checked attribute, and we can bind this to any boolean, and then we can use that boolean elsewhere. Like for example, here I have made it so that only if we accept the terms and conditions, we are able to join. So if we do not accept it, the button is disabled. So this is how you can bind checkbox inputs. And then let's look at radio inputs. Alright, so I have this simple app set up. Here I have 3 radio inputs. This is for gender, so I can actually add each one that says gender. And here we have a radio input, and then its group is binded to the gender variable, and then we have the values. So you can figure out what is going on. So binding a group of any radio button makes it relate to the other radio button with the same group. So now all of these radio buttons will change this gender object, or this gender variable. And if the gender variable, whatever the value is on the gender variable, matches the value that is on the input, then that input will be highlighted, or that input will be selected. And I'm putting this in curly braces because this is a number. So anyway, we have these inputs here, and then I also have an array of genders, so that we can get to know which gender we are. So gender is, and then we get the correct element from the array. So let's look at how this works. So if I click on female, you can see your gender is female, male, other, it works. Okay, let's look at select inputs now. You can see I have an input select here, and I have a bunch of countries here, and you can choose from any country, and then it will list that name of the country here, and it will also update in the select input. So the way we do this is of course using bind value, and we're binding it to this singular country, and then we also have an array of countries, and I'm using the each block to put options here. It's just automating stuff so that we don't have to do it manually. And I'm setting the value to be C and also the display to be C as well. Now if I set the value, for example, to be C, I don't know, country, and if I refresh, you can see it says you live in India country. So the thing that matters is this value, and this is just the display name. So next let's look at let's look at multiple selects. Alright, let's say you live in more than one country, so let's add the option of multiple to the select. Now we don't need this variable anymore because we have to bind the value to an array if it's a multiple select. And then I'll just say you live in, let's just join this so that we can also see which countries you live in without having arrays, stuff like that. And you can see that all of these, you can see that it is a bit weird now, and that is because so it's acting a little bit weird because we have to give another array here, another variable. So let's select selected countries, and by default I will choose India, and then we have to bind this to selected countries, and you can see that it works now. Also here we have to change this to selected countries, and there you go. So it says you live in India, Australia, Canada, UK. And then if you want to select multiple, you just have to press Control or Command if you're on Mac, and then click. You can also use Shift, and then choose multiple within a range, stuff like that. So this is how you do multiple selects in Svelte. Next, let's look at how you can use strings and then interpolate them or display them as HTML. So I'm going to get rid of all of this. Start a script tag, and then I'll say let user input equals to a blank string. Then we'll have an input, and I'll bind its value to user input, and then I want the user to be able to enter HTML into this input, and then I want that HTML to be displayed, rendered. So if I do something like this, actually let's convert this input to a text area, just like that. But of course text area needs closing tag, and if you refresh this, looks like we got the bug. Alright, so we have a blank text area here. Let me just make this larger, and then if I type something in here, you can see it gets displayed there. But more importantly, if I enter some kind of h1 or some kind of HTML tag, you can see that it just gets written here. So this is really good because, for example, users shouldn't be able to enter HTML into the browser, because they can also enter tags like the script tag, which is used to, so they can just write the script tag and then they can type in any JavaScript they want, and then this can be used to do stuff like XSS attacks, and Svelte has default prevention for this, which is really good. But now let's look at if you want the user to be able to type the text as HTML and it should be rendered as HTML. So there are two ways we can do this. The first way is by binding the inner HTML. So first we can say bind inner HTML to user input, but this requires one thing, and as you can see, Svelte is already telling us that, and that is that it has to be content editable. So we have to have, I don't know why it's not giving me my IntelliSense, so content editable, so this has to be set to true. What is this? Cannot be dynamic. If I think I just have to do that then. Okay, yeah, there you go. So content editable has to be true if you're binding inner HTML. So now let me just do this, and you can see that it works now. But the thing is, I can also edit it over here, and then it will still, you can see that it also updates here as well. Let me make this a bit bigger. And this is content editable for you, just in case you didn't know. You can directly edit the HTML of these of the element if it's content editable. And then here I can also add some script tags, but I'm not sure if it will work or not. I don't think it works. Yeah, it doesn't work. Okay, anyway, so you can see you can enter script tags just like that, and you can also enter images. You can enter links, some malicious links if you want, stuff like this. If I click that, it'll take me to some malicious website, so stuff like that. And this is why you shouldn't really do this. But for example, if your database gives you HTML and a string with HTML tags, for example, if you're doing some kind of, I don't know, markdown thing, then you might need to do this. But you should not make it content editable, because people can then access that. So that's why Svelte has a built-in, I don't know how to call this, but Svelte has a built-in thing called @HTML, and what this does is it renders this user input or whatever text we pass to it as HTML. Let me show you. And oh, looks like we got the bug again. Oh, never mind, it came here. So I'm just going to resize that, and I'm going to type whatever I want in here, and you can see that it works, and I cannot edit this as well. So this is how you can render HTML into the DOM. So now the last binding I want to show you is called this binding. So let me just clear everything here. Don't need this. I'll add a script tag now, and I'll say um, let's say let input, and then I'll add an input element here, and I'll just say bind this to input. So now what will happen is this input will bind itself, that is itself, it will bind that element itself to the input tag. And first this will be undefined until this input has finished rendering into the DOM. So let's add a declarative block here, and we'll just log this input whenever it changes. Let's open up the console, and you can see that we have access to this input right here. So first it is undefined because this input has not been added to the DOM yet, but then when it gets added to the DOM, we have access to this input. So let's just say if input, then we'll say input dot value equals to some random text, just like that. And you can see that it sets the value automatically. So this is the this keybind, this is the this bind. You can think of it like the useRef keyword in React. So I'm comparing it to other frameworks because I know most of you have used React. React is, I think, one of the most popular frameworks. Let's look at some lifecycle hooks now. So I'm going to create a script tag, and Svelte has these things called lifecycle hooks that are basically functions that get triggered whenever something happens to the DOM. So we have 4 of these hooks. We have onMount, onDestroy, before update, and after update. So anyway, let's look at onMount, which is like, I think it's the most used hook. So we will use our let's use our example from earlier. So input type text, and then let's bind this to input, and we'll select input. Here let's import onMount from Svelte. So I do something like this so that I can get IntelliSense. So anyway, we have onMount, so let's import that, and we can just call this function here, and then inside this we have to pass a callback. This function will be called whenever the component gets added to the DOM, or the component finishes getting added to the DOM and it is mounted and it is fully interactive. So by that time, of course, our input will not be undefined. It will, of course, be defined. So then I can just say console.log input, and this should work without giving us undefined. You can see just like that. And then I can also set the value. I can do anything to this import. I can set the value to high, and then maybe I can delete this input. So set timeout after a certain time, and then I'll say input dot outer HTML. This is how we delete elements. We just set the outer HTML to nothing, and then it gets removed from the DOM. So let's see. You can see we have high, and then this input will self-destruct, and it will not be there in the DOM anymore. So you can see it's not there in the DOM. There's nothing in the DOM. So this is the on mount hook. Let's now look at the on destroy hook. So I'm going to use a second component for this. So let's go over here and let's make a clock, for example. So I'm just going to get rid of all of this stuff, and then I'll just add a paragraph. That'll just give us the date. So I'll say date right there. Then we'll let date equals to new date. Now you can see, wait, we have to add this to our app.svelte, otherwise it wouldn't work. So let's just add that. So another component, you should auto import. There you go. And you can see that the date is added, but now I want the date to automatically update every second, and it should just get synced up. So this makes a clock. So let's say set interval, the date, this has to be a function, so date will be new date. So we're just reassigning date, and then we'll do this every second. Oh, do we have the bug? No, we don't. So you can see that this clock gets updated, and this is a fully working clock. So if I bring up my bar here, you can see that it did change the time correctly. Anyway, we have a working clock, but now let's say, for example, something happens to this component. I think it errors out, or something happens to this component. Then this interval will keep running, and it will just keep memory leaking, and it will just use unnecessary memory. So it will just use it unnecessarily. So we can clear this interval, and JavaScript has a built-in function for that. So we can just say const interval equals set interval, and then we get an interval back. And now what we can do is we can say clear interval. So clear interval, and then we can pass the interval, and if I refresh this, you can see that this interval is now gone. But we don't want it to be gone right now. We want it to be gone whenever this component is destroyed, and that's when we use the on destroy hook. Of course, you have to import that from Svelte, and then we just say clear interval. So now if I manually destroy this component, maybe something like an if block, if component, and then a slash if, then I'll add the component here, let comp equals to true, and then after 3 seconds set timeout. Let's just delete this component. So comp equals false, and let's do that after 3 seconds. You can see that this is running, and then after 3 seconds it's gone. And now this interval will no longer run in the background, and it will actually get destroyed. So this is really useful, and it can not only be used to delete intervals, but it can also be used to unsubscribe from stores, that I'll show you when we get to the Svelte stores part. Alright, now let's look at the before update and after update hooks. So I'm just going to get rid of all of this, so we don't need this anymore. get rid of this, get rid of all of this too. Now I'll add a before update hook here. So before update, and of course you have to import that. And then we give a function, and then I'll just say console log before. Then same thing with the after update. So I'm just going to show you how this works. And console.log after, and then I'll just add a p element here, just why not. And you can see that it gets logged first because we have added the p into the DOM. Alright, now I have created this little component here that has a button, and then it toggles between two states, show and hide. And if show is on, then it'll show us a license. But now you can see that this doesn't really look good. We can add transitions to make the appeal look better, or to make it look better. And I can import transitions from here. So I'll say import from Svelte transition. So Svelte has built-in transitions, which is like really good, so you don't have to use CSS or stuff like that. It also has support for custom CSS transitions. But anyway, we have these transitions: blur, crossfade, draw, fade, fly, scale, and slide. So I'm going to be using slide. And then to apply transitions to any element, we just say we use the transition directive, and then we give the transition name. And looks like we have the bug. Oh no, we don't. So you can see that it looks much better now. You can also use other transitions like fade. Just change that, and then this will just fade in and out. It's also fly, and this will, oh, looks like it's just the same thing as fade. But anyway, and now let's say, what if you wanted a transition to play when the element appears, and then another transition to play when the element disappears. So let's import two transitions here, and I'll use the in directive to play a transition when the element appears, and the out directive to play a transition when the element disappears. So you can see that it fades out but slides in. So this is transitions in Svelte. There's also, you can also change certain parameters of certain transitions. So there's the duration parameter. For example, I can set this has to be an object, by the way. So duration will be 1000, I think that is milliseconds, so 1 second. And you can see that it is much slower than before. Then there's also a delay parameter. I'll set this to a second of delay. So refresh that, and you can see that it takes a second before the animation plays. There's a lot of there's more properties, and some transitions have their own custom properties, like for example the fly transition. And you can use, and this right here, do not be worried, do not be confused, this is not special Svelte syntax. This is just an object, this is just a JavaScript object inside of the curly braces. So this is, so these curly braces, this indicate that we have a JavaScript expression here, and these curly braces are for the object. So this is not special Svelte syntax, do not be confused. There are other transitions. You can also create custom transitions, uh, but you can use the docs for that. Alright, now let's look at adding classes conditionally. Alright, over here I have a class directive set up. So first I have a variable here that is toggled by this button, and then I have this class directive that will add the class active to this element if this variable, if this expression is truthy. So now I've set it to not active, which means that if active is false, then this will be true, and vice versa. So now you can see that this text is really big, but then if I toggle it, it becomes small, and just like that. Now again, if I remove this, you can see that Svelte has this really cool syntax here, where if the attribute name matches the variable name, then it can be omitted. So you can see that this is how you can add classes, CSS classes by the way, to elements based on certain properties, or based a conditional adding of classes. So this is classes in Svelte, and then there is also, and then there's also, you can also add multiple classes. So class colon maybe not active is just not active, for example. Then we can say not active, we'll set the color to red. Come back over here, you can see that it's red now, but then it becomes yellow later. Now we are going to be making our first project here, and we are going to be making a to-do list app using Svelte. So I've gone and made myself a brand new Svelte template. You can do that too, and I'm just going to call it Svelte to do, and I've already started it and I have it opened up here. So let's go over here into source and app.svelte, and let's just get rid of everything here. We don't need all of this boilerplate, so let's just get rid of that. And now I want to also import a CSS library so that we don't have to make any styles. So I'm going to go down here, and I'm just going to delete everything in this global.css so that we don't have any style conflicts. Now what I'm going to do is I'll just install, or I'll download W3 CSS, and I'll leave the command to it in the description, or you can also use the CDN. But anyway, now I have W3 CSS down here. I can just drag and drop it in here. And then in the index.html, first let's change this title to to-do list, and I'll also, didn't mean to do that, I'll also import w3.css right there. So now we can close this, we don't need this, we can also close this. And now in this app.svelte, let's first add a h1, add an h1, I'll say to-do list. You can see that all of the fonts and stuff have changed because of the new CSS library. Now we can use CSS classes exclusive to this library, which is W3 CSS, and all classes start with W3. And the W3 CSS is a very easy to learn and small framework, and we just made the text very big and to the center, just like that. So that's all for our app component for now. Let's work on some other components. So I'll work on an item, so to do item.svelte, and now inside this item, let's first add a script tag, and then we will get some props. So the first prop will be the item name, of course, which will be just the name, just like that. And for now we'll just only have this prop, and I will just display this as a paragraph. And now I have a challenge for you. I'm going to create a script element or script tag, then I'll add a to-dos array, and then this array will contain some random stuff in it. And now what I want you to do is I want you to display a to-do item for every item in this array using the each svelte block. So pause this video and complete your challenge. Alright, let me show you how it is done. So you type each to-dos as to-do and slash each again, then you give your to-do item, and then you pass it, you pass the name to it as to-do, just like that. Now if we go back over here, you can see that we have AF, we have all of these items that are displayed as a to-do item. So if you, for example, if you rename this to something else, that really doesn't matter as long as you get the correct output and you use the correct way. So now let's make this look a bit prettier. So I'm going to add a I'll add a div, and I'll give it a class of w3 container, w3 border, w3 border black. Okay, I'll make it in gray, w3 padding, and this will just give it some classes or some styles so it looks good. And let's see how it looks now. That didn't save, and you can see it looks much better. But let's actually give it some margin over here. So I'll say w3 margin, then that should give it some margin around the sides. So there you go. And now let's make the component look much better as well. It also deserves some love. Let's add a w3 bar here, then you give it a bottom border. So w3 border bottom, w3 border gray, and we'll give the name. It's like that, and you can see it looks a little bit like this. And now what I want to do is actually this doesn't look that great, so I'll get rid of this stuff and I'll just keep the bar, I guess. And the reason I kept the bar is because we can get some padding. So I'll add a span tag here. I'll give it a class of w3 bar item, then I'll type the name. Now we can get some padding and stuff like that. And now we can add a button that we can use to delete the to-do list and also check the to-do list. So I'll add a button, and then the class will be w3 button, w3 gray, so it'll be a gray color button, and I'll say check, and then button w3 button. Also they have to have the w3 bar item class, I forgot, and the w3 red for delete. Let's see how this looks. You can see we have these buttons here. I'm actually going to push them to the right with a w3 right div here, so just like that. Now of course if you don't like these styles, you can make your own styles, or you can use another CSS library. But you can see we have these buttons in the sides, and we also have the text. So now I want to add some functionality to these buttons. So first of all, let's create an event dispatcher, and I'll say import create event dispatcher from Svelte, and I'll create the event dispatcher. So I'll say const d equals to create event dispatcher. Now what I'll do is I'll add two events to these buttons. So I'll say on click, and I'll dispatch check, and I'll also dispatch delete. And then what we will dispatch is we will dispatch the name, but then this has a little bug, and that is if two items are named the same, then they will both be checked and deleted. So let's convert this to-dos into an array of objects instead of an array of strings. So let's quickly do this, and then each object will have an ID, which I'll just set to date.now, so that we get IDs, unique IDs, and then I'll set the name, which will be just the text, and then I'll also have a checked variable, which will be set to false by default, but then we can change it back to true. And then I'll repeat this a couple of times, just like that. So I'll just repeat that one and once more. Now we need to change our markup so that we pass ID, name, and checked. So now I want you to do this using the least amount of code as you can. So pause the video and complete the challenge. Alright, so to do that, let's first remove this, and we can just spread this object, and let's also export some more props, export let ID and export let checked. And now I'm going to give the ID instead of the name, and then we'll use this checked we'll use this checked attribute as a way to add class bindings. So I'll add a class first, and then I'll add a checked class. Then I'll just say I'll say text decoration will be a line through, so we'll just cut it, and I'll say text decoration color will be purple, just like that. And then I'll add these. I want to add this checked class to the span element only if this checked attribute is true. So I want you to complete this challenge and pause the video. Okay, so I'll tell you how we do it. So we type class and then colon checked. That's it. So now if this checked attribute is true, which it isn't for anything, let me just change it to true here. So if this checked attribute is true, then we should get a strike through here. It is very faint, but you can see the strike through. Okay, now let's add functionality to these buttons. So I'm going to go back over to our app element, and I'm going to actually handle these events. So on check we have one, and then we have on delete. So now let's create these two functions. So on check, let's create a check function. Let's also create a delete function. And I just remember, one thing I remembered is that delete is a saved word, I mean a reserved word in JavaScript, so we can't use that. So instead we have to use del, and I don't know why that however failed, but anyway. Oh my god, I cannot select this. Anyway, let's go over here. I don't know why it's failing so much. But let's go over here and let's change this to del, and here we can see, I don't know why this, oh my god, is failing so much. And here we can also add the check function. Alright, so we have the delete L function here with the which will delete the which will delete the element with the ID that is passed to it. So it deleted everything apparently. It's because all of these have the same ID, that's why. And because they were all created at the same time, they will have the same ID. So let's just change these IDs up a bit. Now if this decides to refresh, why is it not saving? Alright, if we delete one of these, you can see that the correct item gets deleted. So the deleting works. Now let's work on creating an item. And I'm going to go here and I'll add an input, and I'll bind the value of it to the text. So now I'll create a variable called text and make it an empty string. And I'll also add a key down event on it, so on key down, so that we can press the enter key and then we can add the item instead of having to press a button. So on key down, I'll actually just make a separate function for that. So I'll say function key down, grab the event, and this event has a thing. This event has a variable called key, and if this key does not equal to enter, then we just return, because we don't care about any other key. Only if the user presses enter, then we will add the to do. So now I'll also say if to do is empty, then we will return. And actually I'll just trim that so that people cannot be cheeky. And now what I'll do at the end is I'll just append, or I'll use the spread syntax to add a new to do. So I'll say that, and then the ID will be date.now, and the name will be to do, and the checked will be false. So just like that. Now let's see if this works. And also one thing I forgot is I have to trim this. Our input doesn't look really good here, so let's add a class to it, or let's add two classes actually. So I'll add w3 input and w3 border. This will make a bordered input which will look nice. Now if I type something here, you can see to do is not defined. Yes, to do is not defined. I don't know why JavaScript wasn't highlighting that. So this to do has to be e.detail and not just to do. So I'll say e dot fuck. Alright, so this to do actually had to be text and not to do. And let's refresh that, and you can see that this works. And also I'll just set the text to nothing after we are done, so that it does reset. Looks like I did not save, and you can see that adding stuff works, deleting stuff works. Now let's work on the hardest part in my opinion, and that is updating stuff. So we have to use the find method in the array to update an item, and I will leave you to it. So I will give you a challenge, and let's see if you can figure it out. Alright, now we can see this function here. So what I'm doing is I'm going to map all of the to-dos, and if the ID does not equal the ID that we're supposed to update, then we can just return it. We don't have to change it. But if it does update, then we just reverse the checked attribute of the to-do. So this is how we can update it. There are some other ways to do it, and if you use the another way and it still worked, then you still did it correctly. So let's check this app. You can see uh, items are being added, and you can also delete them, you can also update them. So it all works amazingly. And you can see in the console, app was created with unknown prop name. So if this happens to you, then you have to just go over to main.js and get rid of this stuff. So just get rid of that, and you can see that error is now gone. Oh, we have the bug now. I don't know why. Maybe it's because of this. Yeah, there you go. So you can see that it works now properly. And now I will also show you how you can deploy this application to the web for all of your friends to see. So let's do that real quick. I'm going to shut down the server first of all, and then I'm going to type npm run build. So now what this will do is it will build your Svelte application and it will save it in the public directory. So now all you have to do is you just have to visit index.html over here and it will work. But if I visit this, let's see, copy path. If I visit this right here, you can see that it doesn't work, and this is because here you can see in the console file not found, and that's because we have to have it served on localhost, or it has to be served at the root. So let's quickly do that. I'm going to use npx and I'll type npx serve public, and that's it. So npx will use the serve command to serve this directory here, and then we can visit localhost 5000. So let's just do that, and you can see that this to-do list works, and we are not running this Svelte app. So we just this is actually, we are just viewing index.html, but it is connected to localhost using serve. So that is the beauty of Svelte. You don't need to run any background process, so it is serverless. You can run it anywhere you want, and you can also put this on a VPS using nginx, or you can put this on any kind of cPanel hosting, but I would like to use something called Versal. So go to versal.com, and over here you can see develop, preview, ship, all of this good stuff. So you have to first log into your Versal account or create an account. Alright, I have signed into my Versal account using GitHub, and I'm going to deploy this Svelte application. So we have to install the Versal CLI, so just type in npm i-g Versal, so just like that. Alright, once you have installed Versal CLI, we have to log into Versal by typing Versal login. Now this should connect to the Versal servers, and then it will ask you for your email. So just enter your email. So I'll enter mine, and for obvious reasons I'm not going to show it. I'm just going to censor it. And you can see that it says that they have sent an email to me and I've received that email. So just open your email and then click on that verify button in the Versal email that they sent you, and now it should open the Versal website, and then you can see that it says email address confirmed, and here also congratulations, you are now logged in. So now you want to type Versal dot, so just like that, and that should just deploy it. So set up and deploy Svelte to do, so click yes, and I want to deploy it under my name, and link to existing project, let's not do that. So my project name will be Svelte to do itself, and it is located in the public directory. So type that in, and it's going to upload it, and you can see that it auto detected Svelte that I'm using. So Versal is really good at that, so this is why I recommend it. And you can see that the build command is rollup -c, and the output directory is public. Actually, I think I'm supposed to choose this dot slash directory. Actually, I'm very sorry. So let's just do this again. So let's not link to an existing project. My project name will be Svelte to do. My code will be located in dot slash, and there's my build settings. So I don't want to override anything, and it should now deploy it. Alright, you can see deployed to production, and now if you go to your browser and then if you paste the link that was automatically copied to your clipboard, you can see that we have our to-do list. So everything works really amazingly, and I can delete stuff if I want to. I can check the to-dos, you can see that works too. I can add new to-dos, and then let's say for example you wanted to make a change. You made a change in your project. So let me just open up VS Code for that real quick. So I don't have VS Code open, so let's just open that up. Okay, I'll remove this terminal for now. But anyway, now once VS Code launches, I want to add some padding to this input. So let's go over to our app.svelte right there. Um, Looks like VS Code is taking some time to. Okay, there you go. So in this W3 input class, I just want to add W3 margin, not padding, sorry. I'll just add this W3 margin class, and then I'll write that. So I'll save it. Looks like it's taking a bit of time. Alright, so it saved it, and I'm gonna bring back my terminal, and you can see if I run Versal --prod again, it should now automatically deploy my project to production. So let's wait for this. So it's building it, and you can see that it has successfully deployed it. So now if you refresh this page, looks like there's a bit of a bug here, that you can fix yourself, and then you can again redeploy by Versal prod. So this works properly, and this is the end of this course, or this is the end of the first part of the course. In the next part you will learn about contexts, routing in Svelte, and also Sapper, which is like Next.js but for Svelte. So it supports stuff like SSR. So the next part will be out very soon, and once it's out I'll put a link to it in the description. So thank you all for watching this episode and this course. Um, if you really like this, please be sure to leave a like, share this, and if you have any questions, you can leave them in the comments section down below, and I will see you guys in another video. Bye.